Well, welcome, and today we have author Angie Dicken with us. Angie, thank you so much for joining us.
Having me.
Now, tell us a little bit about your books and your style.
Yeah, so I have two different kinds of books. I have some historical romances that are set in different places in the U.S., and then I have some Iowa sweet romance. So it's all set in Iowa where I live, and they're just sweet romance stories. That's what I'm currently releasing right now. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I liked on your website you said clean reads focused on character growth.
Yes.
So how do you come up with characters and what they're going to be growing in?
Oh, it's tricky, but I always have to have the idea of where the character's going to end up before I start a story. And I get a lot of inspiration from setting and area, like where I'm at. I actually have a degree in landscape architecture, so I'm always aware of the context of landscape and what people are like that live in certain places. And so I think my characters kind of come from a lot of like just observation of life around me. So, Yep.
Now, does inspiration just strike you, or do you sit down and like today I'm going to write this, I'm going to figure out what...
Yeah, well, it really depends. This past year, I had 3 books due within the year, and so I didn't always have the luxury of just waiting for inspiration to strike. So a lot of the time, I have to kind of trick my brain into getting into that creative mode, and sometimes it's sitting in a really beautiful place with my laptop and coffee and music, and having specific music that puts me in the zone of the story. And just sometimes I just have to write and eventually like get into that creativity mode. But as far as a lot of my creativity comes from historical settings and things that are factual that I'm like, ooh, but what if this happened? And so, yeah. As far as my Iowa stories go, my creativity just comes from experiences of being in those settings with my family and just the joy it brings me. And it's so fun to set things in places that I've actually been. So, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you balance kind of writing and family and getting all that done?
It's tricky. At the beginning of this year, I signed on to work pretty much full time, and then I also had these 3 books that were under contract, and 3 months into it, I was like, when am I going to sleep? So I really have to carve out. It can't be I'm writing with the family everywhere. Like, I have to focus on my family. So I'm very specific as to these are my writing hours, and I have to step away from the family and go to my office or go to a coffee shop. And but I never try and blend the two together because it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So and I don't think it's fair to my family if I'm constantly distracted. So I try and be very careful as to setting aside 2 hours a day to do writing elsewhere.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Who influenced you to become an author?
Oh man, I have loved story and writing stories. I mean, I have stories from when I was 8 years old that I wrote, and I grew up in England, and my teachers and the assignments that we had were all very literary focused, and the books were I read literature from a very young age. But as far as pursuing publication, I would say my husband. I kept telling him about this story that I was writing, and he told me, you need to go to a conference or something and learn and see if this is truly what you want to do. And so he kind of pushed me to my first Christian writing conference, where I met a lot of the ladies that are here today. So yeah, so it's a blend of lots of people.
And who did you like to read, maybe as a young adult?
Yeah, so well, as far as, I would say Charlotte Bronte was a big author that I loved reading in my senior year of high school. As a young adult, I would read Jean Plady, who I don't know if people know her, but I would go check out her books at the library when my kids were little, and they were like clean accounts of Henry VIII's wives. And I just love history so much, and British history especially, since I kind of grew up there. And so it was just such rich language and just perfect like story setting, like telling. And so yeah, I would say Jean Plady. C.S. Lewis I read as a young adult. I love his nonfiction as well. So yeah.
Awesome. How can people learn more about you?
Oh, well, I have a website. It's angiedicken.com, Dicken without an S. and I pretty much keep that updated. And there's a subscribe button there, and I send out a newsletter. Basically, it's usually about every couple months. It's when I have news, and I try and share about a book I'm reading and do lots of giveaways. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and I post on those pretty regularly, like once a day at least. So I try and always give insight into like my next story or how I was inspired by it.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah.
Well, and how about your journey? I love hearing different authors' journeys. Some are harder than others, mm-hmm. and I usually have a hard journey on things that I do, so it's nice to know I'm not alone. But how was your journey?
Okay, so I always call it my popcorn journey because I started in 2010 going to writing conferences and pitching for publication. And then I met my agent in 2012 at a conference. The conferences were like huge for me. That's where, because I'm kind of an introvert, so having to force myself into these situations was really good. And then I got my agent, but I didn't get my first book published until 2017. And then I actually had 2 books published within 2 months of each other, which was very interesting. And then just on and off, like I had 2 more books after that. And then this series that's out right now, the first one came out in May, and the next one comes out in January, and then the next one will be around Christmas time. Those are just recent, like I wrote those all this last year. So it's been like and it's so, what I love is that no matter if I'm writing a historical or a contemporary, once I'm in the story, it's just so life-giving. Like I just get connected to the characters, and I feel like, okay, I really can, do some fun, creative stuff with the characters. But it's been a journey of like not consistent. Yeah.
Kind of like regular life.
Yes,
really.
Especially with 4 kids in the mix and having to do things for them. So it's a lot.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing about your books and your journey, and I just greatly appreciate you taking time and talking to me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it too.
Yes.